Okay, here we are with part three of, first of all, two wonderful, wonderful friends. And now I am so honored to have both Dr. David Gruder and Ty Pruitt on for Two Shades of Knowledge. This is part three, having real conversations with two men coming from two different perspectives, two different lifestyles, one a Jewish man and a Black man. And in America, and since the beginning of time, there have been different controversies that both as far as the Black communities, the Jewish communities have had to deal with. So we have been having some real conversations. Let me unmute. Okay, David and Ty, you can unmute yourself, and everyone else, you can unmute yourself as you have questions to ask. So since this is part three, many of you have already been getting to know these gentlemen. You have tuned in for every series. I want to thank you for being on, and we're going to move forward with Dr. David Gruder and Ty Pruitt, giving us real talk from the Two Shades of Knowledge. So David, thank you for being on. Ty, thank you for being on.
A pleasure to be back with you.
This is part three, so don't hold back, people.
That's right, 3 out of 3. This is the grand finale.
Yes, and now I know that we cut off really quick because we had gone over time the last series, and I think either Christina or Hallie had questions that I think you guys were sitting on. I might be putting you on the spot, but you can let me know if you have those questions that you'd like to resume on. Or Jay, we had not heard from you our last session, and I'm glad you're on. And again, so if you have questions. And then we've got Franklin on, Leslie. And so you guys, in addition to my questions or whatever their subject is or what they're speaking on, feel free to let me know when you have a question. You can always type it in the chat or just chime in. You can unmute yourself.
And Jay did type in a chat message saying that he has an interesting perspective as he's from a mixed Jewish dad and Black mom who converted to Jewish.
How interesting. Well, do you want to share that perspective before we dive right in? This is an open conversation.
We can come back to it later.
Okay.
Cool.
You know what?
Look forward to it.
I'm just so curious. Jay, what is your background? I love the coloring. What is that?
It's the Ninja Turtles subway layer from the Ninja Turtles movie.
Oh, okay. Okay, I love the coloring. It's totally off subject. So now when we left off on some of the questions that I had, we were talking about privilege. And Ty, I had a question that was just kind of burning that I wanted to ask you. So you say that even though being on the receiving end of racism, other isms can be quite traumatic. Holding on to trauma is not a badge of honor, though. So are you saying that some people get attached to their traumas?
Yes, they absolutely do. And I think that's, I hear that a lot when I talk to a lot of the youth that I counsel. And I get so mad when I talk to these young guys, and the first thing they talk about is they can't find a job because of white people in slavery. And I think that's a curse for us in the Black community. It kind of goes twofold, because on one hand, you've got these privileged white people telling us to get over slavery, but on the other hand, you've got these lazy Black folks saying, well, I can't do anything because of slavery. And it pisses me off to no end, because one of the things I'll always remember on the night that Barack Obama got elected, one of the most important things that he said that sticks in my mind is, I need your help. He said, I can't do it alone. I need your help. And the reason I remember that so much is that after probably about a year or two after Barack was elected, I would walk through the streets of the hood and I would hear all these guys, standing on these street corners smoking weed, talking about Obama ain't done nothing for me. But my answer to them is Obama never said he was going to come to your house and grab your hand and take you out to look for a job. He just made it easier for you to find one, but you have to do the work. And that's the same thing you could say, and I know this is probably getting off subject, but it's the same thing that you could say when you get into religion. You got all these people, begging God for these different things that, never come, and then they get mad because it never comes. But the problem becomes is he created you to do your own. He didn't say he was going to be down here walking you with it. It's like that old saying, you take a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And until we start, and we have to let go of that tag to where we feel like that white people are holding us back from everything because of slavery. Slavery was traumatic. Slavery and the Holocaust were two of the most horrific things that has ever happened in the history of man, besides probably the Inquisition. But at the same time, you have to grow past that. Whenever I'm talking to friends, my white friends, we're talking about the racial disparities throughout the country, I never talk about slavery, because if you're the granddaughter or great-granddaughter or great-grandson of a slave owner, that doesn't mean I hate you. Now, if I meet your, 200-year-old great-great-great-granddaddy, we got a problem. But you cannot hate, you cannot punish the son for what his father done. And I think that's a lesson that we have to learn and be able to get through. And to answer your question, hopefully that answered your question.
It did. It did. And you know what? But I'm so glad also, Ty, that you brought up that there are individuals that need to do better, no matter what race or nationality you're looking at. And that's the good thing about Partnering for a Better Tomorrow is this is not designed to just point the finger and blame the white man or whoever or police. It is about educating and having real conversations about what needs to change, no matter who you are. And to point out that you get out of anything in life what you put in, and it's not for you to sit and wait for someone to make your life better. So thank you, Ty, for bringing that out. Dr. Gruder.
I want
to also one more thing on that, if I can. We have to stop as Black people demanding that white people owe us something, because they do not. We owe ourselves a life. And I think that's a huge problem in our community, that we spend so much time blaming white folk for our disparities that we forget that we are free now, that we do have a choice, that there's more Black wealth in this country today than there has ever been in the history of people. And we have access to use that if we quit demanding or whining about what we, and I heard Roland Martin say once, and I bring this up because I'm in the film industry. I heard Roland Martin once say that there are no Blacks in Hollywood that can greenlight a film. And that's a lie. That is an absolute lie, because I think that what we do, how we get stuck is we tend to base our worth on the worth of what white people are. And let me explain to you. Because I am not the president of Universal Pictures does not mean I cannot greenlight a film. I could greenlight, need to be the president of Universal, the president of Warner Brothers. There are, I mean, look at Oprah. Who's going to tell Oprah that she can't make a film? You know what I'm saying? And I think that I'm sorry, go ahead.
What does greenlight a film mean? Please explain that, greenlight a film.
Okay, when you greenlight a film, that's basically me telling you you have the permission to make it, and I'm giving you the money to make it. That's what greenlight a film means. And we have such wealth in Hollywood. Some of the highest paid actors and producers in Hollywood are Black. Will Smith is one of the highest paid actors in Hollywood. Nobody will tell him no. Denzel Washington, nobody will tell him no. So for somebody to say that there are no Blacks in Hollywood that can greenlight a film, it's absolute, it's basically, it's whining and it's begging, and I get tired of it, because the mistake that we make is, and a lot of Black people don't agree with me when I tell them this, but the mistake we make is allow Hollywood to pacify us. And let me explain that, and I'll get off this subject. Look at, actually, Jay, I could throw this one at you. Fantastic Four. They took a franchise that was historically white from the 50s and 60s in comics, Human Torch, into a Black man. And then they took his family and made them Black, and he adopted a white girl.
Yeah, I liked that. The only thing I didn't like about that was the exposition scene where they talk about it, because it's just like, as being someone who doesn't look like their parents, it was just kind of an awkward, random conversation that happened for no one. But like, all this crazy, fantastical stuff is happening. Like, they're getting superpowers, and they literally slow down and stop so Susan Storm could explain why she's white and her dad is Black. And I was just like, that was unnecessary. But I did like that Michael B. Jordan playing Human Torch. He did a good job at it.
And yeah. And here's my issue with that. Here's where I go with that. The reason I don't like that, and when you look on social media, you get all these Black people saying, why can't Bruce Wayne be Black? Why can't Clark Kent be Black? Why can't all these historically white comic book characters be Black? But I want you to think of it like this. Black Panther 2 is coming out. What if Hollywood decided to say, okay, well, Chadwick Boseman, passed away. So how about we take Brad Pitt and make him king of Wakanda? What do you think Black people would do?
That would not have gone over very well.
Black people would probably burn Hollywood to the ground. So my argument with that is I tend to feel that Black people consistently fight the battle and run from the war. The war is to create Black content. It's not to change historically white, characters in Black, because that's a pacifier. That's basically Hollywood telling me, here, take this and shut up, because I'm sick of you asking me for stuff. You feel what I'm saying? Yeah. So I think that's a huge problem with us, and that's something we have to fix, and that has nothing to do with white people.
So I'd like to double back to where we started here. Someone else wanted to weigh in first? Did I hear somebody?
I think it was Hallie.
David. No, just saying appropriation in either direction or assumption in either side doesn't make it better and doesn't turn away from the issue. So I really hear what you're saying, Ty.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Dr. Bruder.
Well, I think
Oh,
I
come in,
think
Christina. Hold on one
Christina
moment.
had something to say, and then I'll double back.
Oh, go ahead, Christina.
You're muted, Christina. Unmute yourself, Christina.
Unmute yourself.
There you go. Now
There
you're
you go.
unmuted.
I agree with Ty so much about historic accuracy, in that we need to be very accurate in that way. But I wanted to talk about victimhood, because victimhood is it happens in not only in the in every community that's been victimized, but it also happens, like, as a woman who had abuse in my past, I could live in that victimhood of having been abused, and I had to choose not to, and to move forward. But by the same token, that you would need to, that you move forward and you have that mindset that you are powerful as Black people, that you are powerful, that you don't live in that victimhood. That does not preclude the white community from rectifying justices, of course, and all of that. So it's not either or. I think so much of the time we get kind of entrenched in an either or mentality. And what we have to realize is that it's both. It's both the white community and all of us collectively in every race. We're righting these wrongs. We're addressing them. We're acknowledging them. All of those things at the same time. Ty's living in his power. And that's what we were talking about last week with the police officers. I didn't mean to tell you how to act or how to think or anything when you encountered those police officers, but I was just hoping you felt your power as and the fact that when you keep in that mindset that you were just speaking of, that you are not that you're an accomplished person, that maybe the encounters would be different, because if you have the encounter and all of a sudden you feel you're that little boy or that young man that's been hurt or pulled over, or I just figure that living in that power moves us forward so beautifully, because because just as my life, I can move forward out of this, having been in this abuse, and then come out of it and live powerfully and live up and not have any self-pity about it or anything. But at the same time, it doesn't rectify the wrongs, and it doesn't take away the lost years. It doesn't do any of those things, but it makes me be able to live today, and it makes me be able to help other people, and all of the things that I need to do, teach my children what love is, that in the years that they saw something that I should have gotten them out of, proactively. So I'm using that as an example of this. So both are true. Both the fact that you aren't a victim anymore, and that things need to be rectified in the world and in this country.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for adding the both and to the discussion,
Yeah.
Christina. I absolutely get where you're going with this, Ty, and I think it's very important, the points that you're making. What I'd like to do is just double back to the theme of traumatization as a badge of honor, because I want to make sure that everyone really has a deeper understanding of that from a traumatology point of view. I'm going to put my psychologist hat on for a moment. What accompanies unresolved trauma is a state that in psychology is referred to as learned helplessness, where the baggage, the lack of resolution of trauma leads to a belief that I have less power and less impact than I actually have. That's what learned helplessness means. And what happens with trauma, especially now, we're talking not only about individual trauma here with isms like racism or recovering from a history of a people being enslaved, for example. We're talking about collective trauma here as well. And I want to give you an example of collective trauma to really drive home the notion of how victimization is not a badge of honor. people who have sustained post-traumatic stress disorder by serving in the armed forces and being in wartime conditions, some people in the armed forces come back from war with post-traumatic stress disorder. And what happens with people with severe veterans with severe PTSD is that they really can't hold down a job. They're still too traumatized. They haven't recovered, and they go on disability. And what they tend to do, totally understandably, is they tend to find other veterans who are themselves on disability and in unrecovered trauma. And they try to be a supportive group to each other. God forbid one of those veterans should actually then later recover from trauma and emerge from PTSD, because that creates two problems, one economic, one social. The economic problem it creates is now they're going to have to be willing to get off of disability insurance. They're going to have to go back to work. The second is a collective trauma piece where they will oftentimes, thank God not always, but oftentimes be shunned by their fellow traumatized veterans, because now they're not part of the victim group. Now they're recovering and they're reclaiming their lives. So they get shunned by their fellow disabled veterans. And that is an example of a dynamic having to do with group trauma, where if we're traumatized for long enough, or if we stay in unhealed trauma for long enough, we start identifying who we think we are through the trauma itself. And we start to create community around us of people who are similarly traumatized, so that we can each reinforce how right we are to be as victimized as we are. So I want to broaden the picture, especially for people who aren't of color, to make sure that you can understand the dynamic of collective trauma that that really cuts across any traumatized group, so that you can really increase your understanding and your empathy around collective trauma in any one given group, such as African Americans, for example. So I want to make sure that's clear to everyone.
It is.
All clear.
But you know, David, when you saying that, there are some real traumas that have existed and continue in people's lives that they have not been able to get over, whether it's because of lack of access or finance to receive adequate services or whatever. And then there are those that where people choose to stay in the environment of trauma. And again, that's where I'm hoping that conversations like this and others that are to come will help people to start looking at themselves also and seeing why they have continued to be in the situations that they're in. Because why is it, as I'm speaking as a Black woman and from the African American community, I didn't grow up in the best of the communities, like in extremely high income, but I also wasn't in the worst. But even in a same household, you can have individuals that some of them, a brother may end up in prison and another one may end up a doctor. And so raised by the same parent. So it's also one of the things that I have to remember that my mom always said to me, life is only 10% of what happens to you and 90% of how you deal with it. We have choices. We have access to opportunities, especially as Black people, that we've never had before. But at the same time, there does still exist systemic racism. There are things that still exist that will keep us from in some ways moving forward. But that's where you just have to work around it. And you have to find another door that you might need to go through instead of the one you tried, instead of giving up. And so I just wanted to say that. Now, Hallie, were you getting ready to say something? I kind of saw you movement there, and I didn't want to ignore you if you were getting ready to say something.
First of all, she put in the chat, for those of you who don't have your chat open, A
Okay.
wonderful book by Marty Seligman, who's a psychologist in the positive psychology part of the psychology field. And one of his books is on learned helplessness and learned optimism. In fact, a couple of his books are on those themes. So if you want to learn more about the psychological dimensions of learned helplessness and learned optimism, one of your sources that you can look at is books by Martin Seligman.
Okay.
Go ahead, Hallie, and add on whatever
Thank
you
you.
want to say.
So those are two books. And that's the thing that a lot of people are studying. And I so appreciate what you were saying, David, victimization, survivorship, and the ability to learn from one's experience. I've gone through things, so has each of us here. And some of them are gender, some of them are racial, some of them are age, some of them are socioeconomic. You know, that's why growing up in New York City, that's not just the melting pot, but it's the come together zone. And, you know, so growing up on the edge of Spanish Harlem all my life, knowing that, you know, I trained with someone who called the homeless people denizens of the street. The way that you view someone else as other or as a member of your own community, whether or not it's your own tribe, makes a vast difference to how you relate their circumstances to your own. And once you can identify with someone else's needs, not superior or inferior to your own, then you're having a conversation from the heart instead of the head, as Martin Luther King Jr. said. So the importance of being able to really connect and relate, it's not just your own view, but understanding that someone else's viewpoint might be equally or even more valid than your own if you take the time to actually breathe and listen.
Wow. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Now, let's see. Let me go back. Now, David, also, I know that I want to make sure that I'm not asking you this and you answered it, but the hidden damage of chronic trauma. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. The hidden damage of chronic trauma is I want to illuminate two pieces of that on this webinar. One is something that is called in certain circles illness identity disorder. I was alluding to it earlier. And what that is jargon for is where if I have a chronic condition such as chronically unhealed trauma, I start to craft my sense of identity around the trauma. So I think of myself first as a traumatized person, no matter what the source of the trauma is. It might not be cultural, it might be personal trauma. So the nature of the trauma doesn't matter. But if I carry that kind of baggage around with me for an extended period of time, I start to recraft my notion of who I am and how the world works around being traumatized. Carolyn Mace, decades ago, coined the term woundology, where I identify with my woundedness. And God forbid you should take my woundedness from me. God forbid I should heal, because if I heal, I won't know who I am anymore. And for a lot of people, that's really a scary leap forward. It's actually not knowing who I am is the beginning of transformation. It's like, okay, now let me discover who I am on the other side of trauma. I also want to add in my definition of forgiveness, which is not instead of the other delicious definitions of forgiveness that are out there, but one that specifically connects into the issue of trauma, which is forgiveness is demonstrating in the present that I'm no longer harmed by the unacceptable that occurred in my past. I'll say it again. Forgiveness is demonstrating. Sorry.
That's a good quote.
I'm gonna write that.
That's a quote.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Forgiveness is demonstrating in the present that I'm no longer harmed by the unacceptable that occurred in my past.
That's
And
good.
that requires work. We don't just snap our fingers and all of a sudden we've recovered from multiple traumas or cultural trauma. There's trauma healing to be done. Fortunately, there today are wonderfully fast and effective methods for healing unresolved trauma. Methods like EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, methods like energy psychology methods, which are often referred to as tapping, because you're actually tapping on acupuncture points while doing a number of other more Western oriented things while you're activating your acupuncture system. The most well-known energy psychology method is emotional freedom techniques that some of you have heard of, EFT. These methods are very effective and very rapid in being able to help people recover from trauma quickly and fully. And so there are no longer any excuses to staying in trauma. There's simply the willingness or unwillingness to find the resources that make trauma healing possible. Sharita, I went a little bit off of your question. You want to bring me back to the parts of your question that I haven't answered yet?
Let me go back. Because you know what, and I didn't say all of it. I talked about trauma and the damage, but also because we were talking about wearing it as a badge of honor.
Right.
And I was saying, what is the hidden damage of chronic trauma?
The hidden damage is
But now, oh, go ahead.
let me add in one other thing about the hidden damage then. About 20 years ago, the Kaiser Foundation was conducting a long-term study on the effects of what they were calling adverse childhood experiences, i.e. trauma, on adult functioning. And what they found very, very clearly was that people who carried unresolved adverse childhood experiences or unresolved trauma from childhood into their adulthood had a far higher rate of physical illness than people who didn't carry unresolved trauma into their adulthood. And it's not just physical illness, but psychological trauma.
David, before
Difficulty
you
in
go
relationships,
further,
etc. I'm sorry, Sharita, go ahead.
Before you go further, what could be some of those traumatic instances that youth experience that go along with that? What are some of the things that they may have experienced?
Sure. So you could think about the usual things that most people think about, physical abuse, sexual abuse, but we can add on top of those kinds of things, bullying, chronic neglect, indulgence, where a child can do no wrong, no matter how much wrong they're doing, where they basically are trained into being a narcissist, into being self-centered because they never had any healthy boundaries set. So kind of like the opposite of abuse, the absence of any kind of boundaries, healthy boundaries. People who have grown up with parents who themselves were traumatized, and then the children developed what's called vicarious trauma, where they didn't get the nurturance they needed developmentally, the appropriate nurturance that they needed, because their parents themselves were too wounded to be capable of providing that. So there's just a whole range of different types of adverse childhood experiences. And it's not the experiences. I really want to underline this. It doesn't matter what the experiences are. It matters whether or not they get digested in ways that help us grow and move forward, rather than sit like an undigested meal in our stomach, giving us heartburn and making us feel nauseous. because we've eaten bad food and we can't eliminate it from our system. The issue is not the events. The issue is whether or not we come to a relationship with those events that enables us to expand our authenticity, expand our capacity to connect and bond with others and collaborate with others, and expand our ability to have positive influence and impact in the world around us. If we have any kind of life experience that we are making sense of in a way that diminishes our authenticity, diminishes our capacity to connect with others, or diminishes our ability to have positive influence in the world, that's a sure sign that we have an undigested life experience, a trauma that has never gotten resolved.
Well, you know, David,
If I
again, I want to point this out on what has tended to happen. Oftentimes in the Black community, by the time African American kids are in their teens, they, especially low income, have experienced so much trauma, whether it's the police busting into their home or a neighbor's home. There are kids that step over, if not dead bodies, but bodies that have addicts that are overdosed laying in the stairway that they step over, and that's something they're used to.
Yes.
To living in food deserts and not being able to eat until they go back to school the next day, to being bullied or walking through gang-infested communities. See, there's trauma after trauma after trauma that not only these young children are experiencing, but their parents also grew up experiencing. And then on top of that, and I've learned more about this in dealing in the nonprofit arena for the past 30 years. On top of that, these same individuals do not have access to the counseling or the services that could help them come out of these traumatic experiences. Now, I'm not making up excuses. What I'm saying is this forum has been developed to start addressing the issues of all individuals in need. And it's times that even my best friend who I grew up with, she's white, I'm Black. And we grew up in a fairly mixed community, but our family was one of the first Blacks that first moved to that community. And she didn't feel what I felt when I walked into a room and everybody's eyes were on me, or if we were at the pinball machine or whatever at the pizza place, that the parents came and pulled their kids away from where I was playing. You know, there's things that and I want to bring all this stuff out in the open, because people always think that the only ones that will experience the kinds of things that we see on television are those that must have been doing something, or those that, you know, or they must be living in a gang infested community. We as African Americans, David, continuously experience things that allows our traumatic situations to stay long into adulthood, which also, if those traumatized adults are living with that, then without a doubt, their children are going to live with the effects of the trauma that their parents went through.
You know,
And how do we reach more of those populations? And not just in Black communities, but I'm talking about poverty-stricken individuals that one day we all are going to have to deal with, whether it's in the workforce or whether they're coming through your window, or whether you're dealing with them at the grocery store and they bumped you and they've been rude or whatever. How do we start reaching those populations more? And you may not have that answer today. David, before you get on, I want to introduce someone that just got on. And you may know him. Carlos Martin is from CEO Space. Ty, I don't know if you've ever met Carlos, but he's coming out with a movie right now. He's a veteran. He fought for our country, and he has something that's coming out right now. And I just wanted to introduce him. And Carlos, if you could say something, unmute yourself and say something to our audience and to our panelists.
Thank you for having me on, Sharita. I appreciate it. You always are doing amazing things with the gifts and talents that God given you. I also wanted to add to the fact of what you were just speaking about. On top of everything that you said, we still in our community still would deal with PTSD from slavery. And we have never had an opportunity to sit on the couch just to talk about recovering from that, from being hung, from women being raped and being separated from their children. And then we're forced in certain communities from redlining or the Black Wall Street or Rosewood and all these different events that have happened. And we haven't had the opportunity to sit down on the couch to talk about these things, to have an opportunity to heal. So just imagine everything that you stated stacked on top of our history, on top of that, still in the middle of the streets protesting, saying we matter. The day we were born, we mattered. But yet we still have to argue the fact that we matter to people on top of that. And we don't get an opportunity to say, I need to flush out these ideas. I need to talk about it. I need an opportunity to heal. We don't have that. We just continue to move forward. What other races call trauma is our normal, you know, and we have to figure out sometimes out a way to cope with that, to make something better and survive out of that. So I appreciate you being open and honest about our vulnerabilities in our culture, because that's the only way we're going to be able to grow. And I look at it as a SWOT report, like we do in business. You have to be able to address your strengths. You got to be able to stress your weaknesses. This platform right here is an opportunity, and we have to see what the threats are to the opportunity, so that way we can continue to improve and grow as a culture. Now, speaking on my situation, I'm a soldier, or excuse me, I'm a former soldier. I've never been in trouble with the law. I came back from war. I was stationed in Landstuhl, Germany. I went to Bosnia during the time that we were in Iraq and Afghanistan. My ex-wife actually went to Iraq. She was just coming back, and we were stationed in Fort Jackson, South Carolina. I was doing a Class A inspection on my soldier, PFC Carlisle, and I was on my way home. And on my way home, there was a police officer in my neighborhood. Now, mind you, this police officer is the same police officer that went viral 2 years ago for being in the classroom, for slamming a 16-year-old Black female on her head and throwing her across the classroom. And still got away with that scenario. This is the same officer who attacked me and my ex-wife and beat me in my military uniform. Now, mind you, I'm in uniform. And not only did he beat me, they beat my wife in front of me while I was handcuffed, watching them beat my wife in front of me. So I'm traumatized, because I feel like, is the flag a lie? Because what the flag represents is freedom, liberty, and justice for all. Well, when it comes to my culture, we've never had freedom. We've never had liberty. We've never received the same type of justice. So is this flag that I'm putting my life on the line for, because I do love my country, I do love every color in the crayon box, has it been a lie to me? Because here I am, coming back from war, protecting the country that I love so much, and I'm on the ground being beaten for the color of my skin. Not only am I being beaten, I'm wrongfully facing 10 years in jail. Not only did I wrongfully face 10 years in jail, the army who I went to war with and got up and worked out and prepared to defend this country for turned his back on me, because we claim that we're innocent until proven guilty, but that statement depends on your skin color sometimes. So I was treated as if I was guilty. They tried to illegally send me to Korea. I even went to the NAACP in South Carolina. Now, I'm not talking about the main branch, but I got to address our flaws as well. When I went to the NAACP, they said, "How much money are you donating to me?" Excuse me? And I was so offended and so hurt, because throughout history, what you hear about the NAACP, they're supposed to be there to help you, and it's just not a money thing. I went to the Rainbow Push. I went to the ACLU. I went to all these other different communities to get help that I thought would be there for me, and there was no help. So me and my family and people like Sharita, Bernie Durham, September, and her mother, Myrna Grant, blessed me and helped me through the situation. And now you see a young man who has been broken, but who had other people see things in me to put me in the position that I am in today. So today I go from getting beaten by the police in my military uniform, wrongfully facing 10 years in jail. I'm now divorced because me and my wife went through it because she felt like I couldn't protect her, to becoming an actor, to being on HBO Ballers, to writing a book about it, to creating a film about it, to directing in it, to acting in it. And right now that film has become a finalist in 5 different film festivals and more to go. So I just want anyone in the audience to understand this. It doesn't matter where you start. It doesn't matter what you go through. If you practice the consistency of wanting to change your life, then you can do that. And I just have a question that I always ask everyone, right? On any talk show or any interview that I've done. It's just about opportunity. And I'm not putting God on anyone because I don't have a religion. I just feel like I have a relationship with God. So I don't want to be disrespectful to anyone. But my question would be to you is, if you died today, would you get an A+ on life's report card? If not, think about it. You know what I'm saying? Let's think about it. If you died today, would you get an A+ on life's report card? And you are grading yourself. If not, and you're blessed to see tomorrow, you better live like it's extra credit because tomorrow's not promised. Somebody wish they was alive right now, today, wishing that they were able to go through what you're going through today. See, when problems come in our life, the problems are no more than opportunities and tests to show yourself approved to get to the next level. We are where we
Yes.
are in life because this is where we choose to be because of how we chose to handle the problems that we've been through. So in church, they have this
Yes.
word called testimony, and everybody wants to give their testimony. But testimony is a two-part word. It's test and then the moni. The test is the problem or the challenge you face. The moni is the happiness. So in order to get to the happiness, you have to show yourself approved to pass the test. And once you pass the test, you're able to share that happiness with everyone else. And that's what I'm doing. I'm just sharing my testimony with you guys because I was tested, and the secret to getting past through tests in life is consistency. Waking up and being consistent in your word, being consistent in your discipline, being consistent in your blessing and in your light. And that's why I'm Sharita, you inspire me so much, because from the day that I met you, you've always been consistent in giving. You've always been consistent in wanting to do grants, the KI Foundation, CEO space, reaching out and having platforms like this with all these phenomenal people on this platform. And so that's why I wanted to be able to give and not ask for anything, because when you're able to pour into other people, there's a vibration that comes with that because you're doing something from the heart. You know, when we go to food drives and we give to the homeless, we feel better about ourselves because we see someone else don't have the same type of blessings that we have. So when you're giving or when you're pouring and you're giving energy into someone else's life, there's something that comes back with that that's priceless. So my job right now, in the midst of having PTSD for surviving, because when I turn on the television, I see other people that look like me that didn't get the opportunity or the platform that I'm getting right now because they are no longer here. And so I struggle with God. Why did you allow me to live through this? What's so special about me that you said I'm not going to take your life today? And that's because I haven't fulfilled my contract with him. There's more work that I need to do for him, not for me. And the work that I'm doing for him is being a servant for other people so that I can use my testimony to pour into their lives. So that way that they can see that, man, if this dude can go from being in the army, losing everything, getting divorced, being beaten up, facing 10 years in jail, and then having to watch the same officer do it again to someone else. It's the consistency. And I took a risk. And the risk that I took was when I was on Jake Tapper on the news, I gave out my phone number on national television to reach out to the little girl. That might have been the smartest, dumbest thing I've ever done in my life, Sharita, because I did it from my heart, right? I received so many different type of phone calls. I received so many different death threats on my life. I received so many different people pretending to be the little girl and trying to denounce my character as a person by trying to say, hey, send me a sexual picture. Excuse me? What? Of course I wouldn't. Because when you're telling the truth, people want to defame your character because the truth will always come to the light, right? But the thing about sometimes the system in America, we don't want to be truthful, because if we're truthful, then we're not able to continue to keep people asleep. And the longer people are sleeping, the more we're able to prosper. So the platforms that you guys have right now, with everyone speaking right now, you guys are telling truths that will awaken enough people, you know what I'm saying, to create a change or a wave or a different frequency or a different energy to enlighten other people. Now, if we did this and it was 1 million people following us, 2 million, and we went viral, all of a sudden the system are going to be like, hold on, who's on this platform? Oh, Sharita's on the platform. This person's on the platform. We need to start tracking them. We need to start watching what they're doing because they're waking too many people up at one time. But when you're living in your truth and your integrity, you don't have to live in fear. Because I would rather die for something than die for nothing. And so when
Right.
you lose everything, you become focused, you become fearless, you become passionate, you become grateful for today. I am so
Which
grateful
we hear
for
in
today.
you.
Yeah.
Yes, we hear that in you. And you know, and Carlos, thank you so much. Meeting you and your mom was a changing point for me at CEO Space. I'm so grateful that I met the two of you and the fire that you both have. And before I go any further, Ty, I want to make sure if you two haven't met each other in Hollywood, the two of you need to meet. Ty Pruitt, and I'll make sure that I'll do the introduction if you two haven't met already, because both of you are in the industry there. But there's so many people in Hollywood that people always think that they know each other or should, especially being two young Black men. And I don't think the two of you have ever met. So I'll make sure and do that introduction, or I will send your emails to each other. Is it okay for me to just put it in the chat, or should I do it privately, gentlemen?
No, absolutely. You can put out my information in the chat. I have no problem with that.
Okay, then if
And
you
Put it
then if
out
you
there.
could do that, yes, if you could do that, Carlos, put your information in the chat. I'm sure someone may want to connect with you. Ty, again, put your information in the chat. And David, you do that also, so that instead of people just waiting on my email, all three of you are, your information is there. And anyone else that may, like Michelle just got on, who is a fireball in her own right, and a speaker, and just one that is always about empowering. Michelle, if you could put your information there. And Hallie, we talked about that, you connecting. I'm sure you and Christina could have a lot of conversations. So that's the other thing, you guys, is we often miss opportunities to link people, and where your footprint can expand further into other networks. And so, because I may forget when I send the recap to try and connect everyone. So if you'd like for people to reach out to you, please provide either your Facebook, your phone number, or email in the chat so that others can reach out to you. And while you're doing that, put what you do, like maybe 10 words about who you are, what you do, so they won't be wondering why they may want to connect to you. Okay. In the chat also, it looks like Ra, am I pronouncing it right? Had put a link in the chat. This is the study David referred to on adverse childhood experiences. I believe it just asks what existed in one's past, not if those experiences have been overcome. Also, more experiences have been recognized as adverse. So that's in the chat. I'm also going to copy this out, and I'm going to put it in the link on Facebook Live for the individuals that are there that haven't logged in. So now, again, Carlos, thank you. Thank you for being on. And David, it looked like you were going to say something, or Ty. Do you have any comments after Carlos?
Oh, I just bow to you, Carlos. You rock.
Yeah, I wanted to say
Good,
something.
good, good. Yes, Christina?
Oh, I just too wanted to say that Carlos exemplifies what Ty was speaking of earlier, and that you're living out, you're not living in victimhood, but in the power of God every day, and how you can move forward, from things, but yet at the same time you're acknowledging the real true hurts. And I wanted to just touch on one thing as far as how we politically move forward, some of those discussions as far as rectifying some of these wrongs, because we are doing socially that. But I think that part of the reason why there's a roadblock politically when it comes to this is, and I went back to my own victimhood, and part of the thing that I wanted to hold on to was my moral superiority, my power, because as long as I felt more powerful because I was morally superior to my perpetrator. So what I felt. So letting go, at the same time knowing that there was wrong and all of that, when you let go of wanting to, the fact that you have an advantage, a said advantage, and put that humility cloak on, the humility cloak. I was saying politically, when we move into the discussion, it's like a lot of the time it's like a pork bill in the government, how a lot of things get added that people want to this pork bill, and they want to get this, and this with this because they deserve it, and they do. I mean, I'm saying like, not the pork bill deserves it, but what I'm saying is that in the case of rectifying, I mean, we've never had a national apology for slavery. There's never been, there is systematic in certain systems racism. There's all of these things that need to be addressed, but yet sometimes the tone or the way it's done puts off people, and so it doesn't get addressed. And so what I'm saying is that the way that Carlos is living, like his life, like not living in the victimhood part and coming in and trying to cross bipartisan aisles and say, listen, this is what, and not have it be a political party agenda, like one or the other, have it be a bipartisan, let's address these issues without trying to get more on like, or try to push a political agenda of one party or the other and get more it's like a pork bill trying to push through a bunch of other things. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, but what I'm trying to say is that politically there's a logjam, and the logjam is that there's polarization, and the polarization comes from these people over here saying get over it, which is ridiculous and so wrong and like re-injury, and then then on the other side, people trying to push agendas, political agendas, under the banner of power because of the real wrong. And so what I'm saying is that that's the logjam right there.
Well, you know,
something to discuss. Mm-hmm.
You guys saw,
I think that
you saw the Anjanette. Oh, I'm sorry, someone. You saw the
I want to
Anjanette
comment
video.
on. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, where the social worker, you guys saw recently where the police had busted into her home, but it happened way back in February 2019, right? And that video just came out. That's one of those situations, you guys, that can create that trauma that can be long lasting. It could be that anytime someone knocks on her door, let me say this because this happened to me about 9 years ago. The police busted in my door looking for my son, almost broke my foot. Now, I didn't even understand what it meant. When I used to hear people say on television, like on comedy, kind of like black television, and somebody's banging on my door and they go to the door, don't be banging on my door like you the police. I didn't understand that statement until it happened to me. And it is a totally different bang on the door. I mean, it was so loud and jolted me up out of my sleep. And I'm peeking out the door, and then I have a bar door because of the community I live in. And when I opened that door, you guys, they pulled that door open and busted in and almost broke my foot. And they were looking for my son, saying that he had violated, my son had been into a little bit of trouble, and they said that he had violated his probation. Thank God that I had been working in the prison system, helping guys connect to services when they got out, hearing them say, Miss Herring, I was violated. I didn't do anything. I was trying to connect to my PO and he wouldn't return my call and yada, yada. Now, this is when faxing was more popular. So it may have been longer than 9 years ago. So I told my son every time he tried to reach him, I said, send him a fax. Make sure you send a fax. And you guys, some things, and I won't say sometimes, always, when things happen in your life, it is for a reason to me that I feel like God allowed it to happen at that time. Because for me working with the guys in the prison, helped me to prepare my son with ammunition of what he would need. Because they were looking for my son because the PO said he had violated. We had a minimum of 6, almost 10 faxes where my son was trying to reach him to get in touch with him to call him. And if we did not have those, my son would be doing time right now in prison. What I'm saying is, following that event, you guys, I was so afraid going to sleep. Every time I even heard a knock on a neighbor's door, I was waking up in the middle of the night. I didn't realize that I had some long-term trauma from that event that people are experiencing ongoing all the time. And so, I mean, I can probably name so many people in my circle of African Americans that have experienced incidents like that were not caught on police cameras, that we don't know that we can even report it, that we don't know. I at that time, I didn't even know that I could talk to someone to take me out of what I was in, or maybe I didn't have the finances. And it's just important. And David, I'm so glad that you're on, and Hallie and others, because I don't know if you've experienced those things or not, but it's almost commonplace in our communities.
Well, I believe that trauma too, Sharita. I didn't want to diminish that. I absolutely believe that it's so real. And that is the reason why I feel so strongly that this polarization, that we need to break the loggerhead politically to address the systemic racism. And that's what I'm saying that causes the trauma, We need to do police reform,
Yes.
we need to do all those things. But my concern is that that political agendas, different political agendas hijack the process. And what I'm saying is that we need to both acknowledge the real pain and address it without the issue being held as a power structure to push certain agendas that may have nothing to do at all with the trauma and all the hurt and the rectification that needs to happen. That's all I'm.
Yes, like how COVID-19 all of a sudden became a political thing versus dealing with the illness of what is happening. And then following you, Christine, we will go to Ty. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
Listen, I think that it's just to touch on what Christine is saying. The major problem with that conversation is it is political. And once you get political, you take the humanity out of it. A discussion about slavery, about reparations, I'm gonna tell you honestly, I don't even think Black people, and this is just for me, I don't want an apology for slavery. An apology for slavery to me is like a slap in the face. You can't apologize to me for raping my mother. You can't apologize to me for lynching my father. That has to be. I'll tell you a story that I read. I love to read, and I always kind of do things based on history. And I read a story a little while back about an ex-slave. And he had just recently, he was probably about 2 weeks off the plantation, right after the emancipation. And his slave owner, crazy story, his ex-slave owner started falling behind on the bills. So he wrote this ex-slave a letter asking him to come back to the plantation and work for him without being in chains. And the ex-slave, he couldn't read or write. So the person he was living with at that time, he asked him to, send a letter back. And the letter went, I respectfully refuse to come back to the plantation. But if you do want to have a conversation, here is what you owe me for the years you kept me enslaved and working on your plantation. So if you could just put that in a check and send it to me, I'd appreciate it. And I say that because, but do you get what I'm saying? I'll tell you, I think for us, just to touch on a little bit of what Sharita was talking about traumas, a bit on my history that I never talk about. I saw my first dead body when I was 7. My father had a cousin who was one of the biggest drug dealers in the hood, and for some reason, he decided to take me to one of his dope houses. And I saw a overdosed dead body who had died from smoking too much crack. That was my first time seeing a dead body in my life. Now, notice I said first time, because more came after that, coming from where I come from. I had the first time I ever saw a gun pointed in my face, I think I was about 10 years old, by a police officer who just decided he wanted to demand my, I guess, salty to him. I guess he wanted to, show me who was the man. I was 10, playing in the streets. I was 10. My first sexual experience was at the age of 11 by a 16-year-old girl in the hood. I have had traumas in my life that I do not discuss with people, nor do I dwell on, because a long time ago, I made a choice. And I feel that this is huge in our communities, because I always say to the young brothers that I have at my house, and these young brothers that I'm trying to get out of the streets, I always tell them, being born Black, being a Black man specifically, means that you're born at war and you die at battle. Everything in between is just a fight to survive. And I made a choice a long time ago that I would never bend the knee to anything in my life. I would never bow to anything in my life. Nothing. And I think that once you make that decision, you have your own power to pave your own way, to make the life that you want to make without somebody standing above you and telling you what you have to do. And first thing you got to understand is, and this is for the people who are not Black, and this is something that you will never have to deal with. For us, and I don't have any kids, but my cousin, Mike Brown, the biggest challenge that my family had to face with defending Mike Brown was to prove that he was human first. Because as Blacks, that's not how they look at us. It's something that you guys will never have to deal with. And that's something that you have to understand. That's something that you have to take away. So when you talk about Democrats, Republicans, all this crap, neither one is worth the paper they're printed on. Neither. Democrats, Republicans, our government, it's not work. It's all crap, because there's no humanity when you have these conversations. There's no humanity when you have these discussions, because if you don't look at, and I've said this more than enough times on each part of these conversations that we have. When I have these conversations with cops and they try to stick their chest out with me and talk about how cops do so much good, the problem becomes is that until you look at me as a human being, we can't even have that discussion. See, I don't care about you going and playing basketball with the young Black kids in the hood if you gonna go down the block and shoot a damn 17-year-old because he got a toy gun. You know what I'm saying? It's the humanity that we missing. It's the humanity in this country, the humanity in life. And if we can't have a discussion about humanity, if we can't talk from the heart, then we can't have that discussion. I don't care if you believe in God. I don't care if you're an atheist. I don't care what you are. If we can't have that discussion, that humanity discussion, if you can't look at me as a full-blown human being, a full-blown human being first and a Black man second, then that conversation ends before it begins.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Well, you know,
I
Ty,
completely agree with you.
I thank you for that. And we're going to go, Christina, give us a moment. We're going to go to Michelle, and then following Michelle, we'll go to Carlos. And then from Carlos, we'll come to you, Christina.
Well, hi,
Michelle.
everybody. My name is Michelle Broadnax. Hey, Sharita, good to see you.
Hi, honey.
You know, this really hits home to me, and I'll tell you why. I just moved back to my hometown of Massachusetts, very close to New Hampshire, where there's only 5% of us out here. And one of the reasons why I moved back was because my nephew committed suicide. And ironically, when I left 24 years ago, I left after my brother had committed suicide. They both hung themselves. And out here in the suburbs, there are no services for us. The closer you get to Boston, the inner city, there's services all day long. But for us that are in the suburbs, it's as if they think, well, they have a little bit of money or whatever, I'm not quite sure. But to come home and to realize that it's still only 5% African American in the height of all of the racial tension. And I remember what it was like growing up in this town. I have pictures where I have no skin on my forehead because the police beat me. I had, people don't know, one of the reasons I left to California was because I was tired. I was tired of getting physically attacked by police. I was tired of always having to fight. And then when my brother committed suicide, if that's what happened, it was the last straw for me. And so now coming back and realizing not a Black restaurant, I mean, you know, it's like the kids are just forgotten and they're totally outnumbered out here by the thousands. I remember what it was like when Alex Haley's Root came out for the first time. And could you imagine having to get on the school bus, being one of the only Black children, just me and my brothers, of 30, 40 people on that school bus, and then getting dropped off at a high school with thousands of children that did not look like you. And the things that they would say, and just, I mean, my whole time growing up, the chant, a fight, a nigga and a white, every time that we have to fight, you know, that still stays with me, you know? I just want people to know that our kids in the suburbs, they need assistance too. They need help too. I'm like, I don't know how these kids are dealing with all this racial tension right now where there is nobody for them to talk to. There is nobody of color. They're doing a lot of systematic racism panels out here. But when I'm listening in, when I first came in, because I still haven't got on anything, but I'm listening in, and it's not us. You know, we're not represented. And so if so, there's like one person of color on the panel. And I'm listening, as a matter of fact, it was one of my friends in Lexington, Massachusetts, which is very, very, very wealthy. And you have her on the panel and she's crying all day long, you know, trying to fight for why they won't let Blacks in Lexington to this day, you know, and trying to figure things out. And so that's what I'm kind of up against being back home right now. And so this, there's just, I mean, there's no services for them. If there are, there's not us leading them. And so it's like the kids don't have a voice. And so I wanted to bring what I do back here, and it's hard. You know, I got a heavy road to climb because it's so embedded. It's so embedded. And when he was talking about, you know, Democrats or Republicans, it doesn't matter. And I agree with that, because the fact of the matter is in the fabric. It is in the fabric of how America was created. So it's not just about electing a president. If we want to get rid of systemic racism, we got to go all the way back to every single law that was ever created. Because we have to remember, when they did the Constitution, when they did all these things, we were not included in that. When they said all men were equal, we were still slaves. So we were not included in those things. So in order for us to really break it down, we got to break down every single law, all the way down from, state, Congress, all of that, because until we do that, it doesn't matter how long we marching for. I'm almost 53. We've been marching, and doing the same exact thing. And when I went and I looked I looked on YouTube to see some of our older champions at the table, and they're asking for the same exact thing that we're asking for now. So have we truly made any type of progress? And so it's very frustrating. But I also want us to know, like, we cannot forget about, just because, like, my father understands why he, raised me out here. He thought he was giving us a better opportunity than raising us in Boston or in the projects. But matter of fact, my family, we are the only original Black family that have a family house here in Massachusetts. And when my grandmother first bought that house, my grandmother lined the walls with their petitions. And we found that because when we knocked the wall down, we found articles about them trying to push her off the street. And so my family literally there's 25 slaves that came to Haverhill. And my family, we've been here, my father's been there. That house has only been owned by us. And, but it's definitely a struggle for us out here too. And so we definitely need some services. Our young men, the answer cannot be drugs or hanging yourself. That cannot be the answer. So that's why this year, I'm and opening my program for young men of color as well, and looking for men that can deal with men who have post-traumatic stress disorder and understand post-traumatic stress disorder and what they're dealing with, also being, identity crisis. Okay, and then I'm gonna end with this, the identity crisis. And then once we get into a heavily Black populated areas, we're not accepted. How many times I've heard you sound white, you talk white, you dress white, Michelle. Once we get into heavily populated areas of people of color. And so it's just a slap in the face, and you can't wait to get around your people. You get around your people, then you're like, oh, you're not Black enough. So where do we actually get to heal? But the children that are out here definitely need some services. And so it's a hard road to go, but that's why I'm back home. So,
and Michelle, and I'm
it's
glad
been
that
going on forever.
I'm so glad that you're on. I want to introduce you to Dr. David Gruder that is on, who is excellent, not only in working with professionals and helping them to understand better themselves or even their work environment. He works across the board with all nationalities, all races. And I think that he could be very significant in your cause of what you're doing, because we were just talking about the long-term traumatic instances that exist in our life. Your brother and your nephew did not decide to go that day. There was something that was underlying. And again, we're talking about the long-term effects of trauma. Now, next, I want to go over to, and thank you, Michelle, for that. For all of you, Michelle has placed her information in the chat. It would behoove you to reach out and get in touch with Michelle. She not only can help other programs, but I think that a lot of you that are on could be significant. Before I come over to Carlos, the other thing that I want to say, you guys, before now, and the ability to be on virtually and more people realizing what can happen virtually, people were in their own bubbles of their community, their lifestyles. But now with what we're doing right now, even on this call, and even on I have a youth podcast that I do called You, Me, and Them. We were just on last weekend with Heals Pet Food and young girls that are in Uganda, and helping them to step and learning how to come in and become veterinarians, things that they could not have had access to had they not been able to be on a virtual session. So now this is an opportunity for us to reach individuals that are in the suburbs that don't have access, to reach the individuals that are in the low-income inner city communities that are never around individuals that, what they would say, sound white. And now we can bring classes and access to things to them because most everyone has a cell phone now. Carlos, you're probably on your cell phone right now, I'm assuming, with the way that your video is showing up here on the virtual session. So you guys, there's no reason that we should not be reaching the individuals that need us now. And that's why we're having these forums. That being said, Carlos, you're coming up next. If there's anyone else, please put in the chat that you would like to speak, and I'll make sure that I come to you. And then we will get back to our panelists so that we can hear the other shades of what they have to say. So Carlos?
I see things like sweet and sour sauce, right? Because I understand Ty's point, and I understand Miss Christina's point. I have a friend, his name is Isaac, and he's Jewish. And he talked about my situation. He says, King, I want to say, I'm sorry, but I feel like I'll be disrespecting you because I know that I will never go through what you go through on a daily basis, but I can't help the fact that I was born white. And I didn't ask for this, but I benefit from this. And I said, bro, you don't understand how much you just said right there in that statement. One, the fact that you want to be able to, it's not about the apology, but to understand that there's a difference. Two, the fact that you're open to the conversation to start creating something, to do something about this, the problem, to help create a solution. But the problem isn't you. The problem goes to the construction. We were considered 3/5 of a man. So how do you fix something that never considered us wholeheartedly as a person? When it comes to police brutality, if you do the research on the police were birthed from the slave patrol. So how can you root out racism when it was birthed from that out of the police department? Their actual job was to hunt and capture slaves. The slaves look like me. So you see a huge difference in crime, and then you get the numbers. Well, more whites have been killed or have had a situation than black people. I said, well, if whites are the majority and you do the statistics correctly, and you look at the percentages, we're actually dying 4 to 5 times more than our counterpart. So it's a deeper underlying conversation because it is political. Because if it wasn't, we wouldn't have systemic racism. And the people who are the ones creating systemic racism are the people that are in positions of power. I don't care who the president is. Not one president has ever done anything for me. And I don't mean to be rude. I don't mean to be disrespectful. You can keep changing the faces, but if we never address the body, if we never address who is on Congress, who the judges are, who the lawmakers are, it doesn't matter. So I personally get upset with my people when I see us twerking in the street because Joe Biden got elected. What laws change? What is the difference? Oh, the orange man, yo, you guys are so blind to the fact of a face that you don't see what the real cancer is. And sometimes we can be so emotional about what happens to us and we react emotionally because through years and years of trauma, any little table scrap from Mass's table make you feel better. But not one law has changed. I mean, no disrespect to the LGBT community, but the LGBT community has more rights than we have rights. So in certain circumstances, I wish that we would follow certain blueprints that they did to get the rights and the freedoms that they did. But what they did was they got together, they had a think tank. Not only that, they started putting money behind it. You have to buy laws. Ain't nobody finna give you no law just because you're yelling in the street. We've been yelling in the street for how long and nothing has changed. I don't care about a Black Lives Matter on a building. The NFL says Black Lives Matter and we apologize, but yet you still haven't given Colin Kaepernick a job. So a lot of people can say a lot of different things on a lot of different political platforms, but until we actually get to the underlying root, which is law, which is what is on the paper, because sometimes throughout our history, we pass things down through song and dance. But in the other cultures, they use law and they put it in books. And now that's why they say the pen is mightier than the sword. So everything that was written was never in consideration of us. We were never in those rooms. And then when it comes to cultural appropriation, no disrespect, but a lot of things that we create, we don't get credit for. You can go on television right now and name 2 educational Black shows, which would be Blackish and Grownish. So we really don't have representation, because you'll see shows like Empire, or you'll see rappers like Future talking about Molly Percocet, and people think that's a representation of who we are. When's the last time we had a show like The Cosby's, 227, A Different World, something that actually showed us in that being educated or being smart? Where are our shows like Friends and things that represent us? Because the ripple effects of this are humongous. That's why you can have other people from other countries who've never dealt with Black people at all, and they already have a perspective. They already come here in fear of who we are, based off of the songs that they hear, based off of the shows that they see, based off of the roles that we play in movies and everything else. So I think there's accountability on our white counterparts, but at the same time, we have accountability for the content that we create, for the content that we put out, because sometimes we take the money, y'all. And that's just real. And we know anytime you take the money, Mr. Ty, you're in the industry, so you might understand where I'm coming from with this one, sir. You have this creative idea, right, for a film, and then you don't have the funding for it. And it's about our people. So you're going to take it to, let's just say Sharita is white in this scenario, right? You take it to Sharita, who has all the money. You say, I have this concept about Harriet. Oh, excuse me, Ty, we love the film, but we want you to take out this part. We want you to take out that part. We want you to take out that part. We want to take out that part. And you can make your movie. They strip it. They water it down, because you're not allowed to tell the truth. But yet we want the money, so we will come out. To me, Harriet, no disrespect, I know she did the best that she could do in the situation when she created that movie. But that movie was so watered down and it doesn't represent us. I felt disrespected, but I knew why she did what she did. So I appreciate her telling the first superhero story, but she had to do what she needed to do to make the movie. And then you'll have someone like a Nate Parker, who comes out with Birth of a Nation, who told the truth, that will get blackballed, and they'll try to go into his history about something that happened 10, 15 years ago that he was found out guilty on, to blackball the movie so no one can see it. All the ticket sales are gone, and you can't buy the movie, but yet no one's in the audience. No one's bought the tickets. So there's a bigger agenda being played to keep truth covered. And we're accountable for that too. Perfect example would be Malcolm X. When Malcolm X was talking about Muslims and everything else, he was under, I'll just say, the spell, right? But then when he went to Africa and he saw every single color of the crayon box working together, and he found out what truth is, he came back and he had to go. They had to kill Malcolm, because now Malcolm was telling the truth. There is something. Why are we allergic to truth in America? Why is it that we are so conditioned to be hooked to this poison, and we're brainwashed to this poison, when anyone rises to tell the truth and they're effective in telling the truth? Like Dr. King. He didn't die because he had a I have a dream speech. Who cares? So what? You got a dream. A dream means nothing. But when you start telling people to buy land, you start telling people about ownership, you start telling people about owning property, that's a different story. Because now when you own something, there's a different power in that. And I'll end this with this. When I went to CEO space, Sharita, you remember Goddess Lahadi, Miss Myrna Grant? Bernie's
Yes.
September's
Yes.
mother or whatever else. So when I was very depressed, and
Yes.
she touched me on my forehead and touching my stomach. And I'm like, who is this white lady touching me? I don't even know you, right? And but I wanted to be respectful. This woman changed my life. And what she did was she said, baby, you look like you play sports. I don't mean to be racist, but you just look athletic. I said, yes, ma'am. She said, who's your favorite basketball player? I said, Kobe Bryant. She said, tell me about Kobe. Well, he went to Lower Marion High School. Then he went to the NBA, got drafted by the Charlotte Hornets, went to the Lakers, scored 81 points, scored 63 points versus Dallas, got 5 championships. Blah, blah. She's like, oh my God, you know everything about Kobe. What's your stats? I said, ma'am. Oh, she said, oh, you heard me. What's your stats? So you mean to tell me that you're going to waste your time worried about how someone else is living their life, and you don't know what God is supposed to be doing in your life? She says, look around. Everything you do and everything you touch is someone else's dream. So why are you participating in everyone else's dream, but you're not participating in your dream? And it just,
Yes.
and when she sowed that seed of faith in me, and she said, let me tell you something. Most wealthy white people look at most minorities as no more than the gestures in the king's court, because minorities dominate everything they do, but they don't understand the power of ownership. Kobe might have been a great basketball player,
Wow.
but Jerry Buss is the one who's paying Kobe. And actually, Kobe's worth 4 times more than what Jerry Buss is paying him. But if he paid Kobe what he was worth, the Lakers would never make no money.
Right.
What plantation do
Right.
you work for? What plantation do you work for?
Yeah.
Is it McDonald's or Google? Because plantation and business is the same structure. On a plantation, you have a slave driver, and you have massa. In business, you have a worker bee, a manager, and a CEO. The question is, what level are you on? And which one are you? It's amazing that you'll be more disciplined for someone else's dream than you will be for your own dream. It's the
Well,
power
Carla,
of ownership.
I thank you. I thank you. Thank you. And which we're going to have you on because we're going to be talking about your movie. I know that we have Jay and um, Christina that have something to say. But if you guys, Jay, I'm going to let you step in, and then we've got to bring it. Christina, I'm sorry, but we've got to bring it back over to our panelists.
No
But
problem.
Jay, I know. Can you come on and tell
Yes.
me
Yeah.
what it is you'd like to say?
Okay. So it's kind of like looping back to when we were talking about like comic book characters and stuff like that, like about general inclusion and stuff like that. And like the like comic books are very much our modern mythos pantheons and stuff like that. And the way the different companies approach it, the way Marvel approaches it versus DC. So like in the comic books themselves, where how DC's been doing it, since DC doesn't seem to like writing new characters, so they've been retconning. And so what they've been taking older characters that were normally white and making them various different groups, not just black, but also other various ethnicities. Meanwhile,
Yes.
Marvel's been pushing the story forward, and they've just been making new characters, and they've been making it more of a legacy thing. So, but the thing is, both companies received huge pushbacks when they did that, and um, also when it comes to inclusion in media in general, we have this catch-22 where it's the people that just worry about money, and they have no political views one way or another. They're just like, show me what trends, how much money can I make back from this? And they're like, there haven't been any and they say like, well, there's no evidence that a comic book movie starring a black man will make any money. But the thing is, there's no evidence because there wasn't comic book movie starring black men to make money, but because
Mm-hmm.
that hasn't happened, they can't justify making one. So the cycle continues, and it happens all across the board. And
Yes.
and even more so outside of that, what I want to see more in media is and like while approaching various issues from different ethnicity and special interest groups is important, I also want to see more things where people are just allowed to exist. That's what I liked about those older shows, especially like basically everything on UPN and things like that, things like Living Single, things like Girlfriends, things like all of those shows, is that people can exist. They can exist outside of the issues. When I feel like it's almost insulting when you only bring in a black person or a trans person or a gay person to deal with black issues, to deal with gay issues, to deal with trans issues, and they can't just exist. They can't just have a happy life. It sets,
Right.
for newer generations, it sets this weird undertone that their future is only going to be these things. And like but you're seeing it in new, especially in cartoons, where they're trying to change the tone, like early on, where they have like Dragon Prince, where the royal family is black and things like that, and or various shows where it's not an issue that characters are gay and same-sex couples exist and just exist naturally. And I always like to
Mm-hmm.
point out more so that like there is only one video game I can think of ever that has a Native American in it who isn't a Native American for a plot reason. And that's Infamous Second
Ah.
Sons. Every other video game I've ever played that has a Native American, whether than the main character or not, usually they're there for a reason. And that reason is usually to deal with some form of Native American problem. And but like and it's just like, and you see the same thing in media. It's rare that you see a Native American person in media that's not there to it's because that's that isn't there because it's a Western or because like something or other is happening. But like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Great distinction, Jay.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Very interesting.
I'm going to come over to our panelist, Christine. Now, you guys, we don't have to cut off at an hour and a half. That's just our timeline. So, David, I'm bringing it back to you guys, but I just want to say something else. Inez has been silent, except in the chat, and I ignored. Inez had says, "It's the problem of humans looking at someone new and immediately trying to put them in one of many boxes. The idea of categorizing is what is breaking us." And Inez, thank you for that. Am I pronouncing your name right? Inez, you can just shake your head. I see that you're, yes?
Well, you can unmute yourself if you need to correct how we pronounce your name.
Inez, let us just hear your voice. Am I saying, is it Inez?
It's Ines.
Enes? Enes.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Enes. Enes, where are you? What city?
Right now I'm in Prince George, BC in Canada, but I
Okay.
am normally in LA.
Okay. Well, it's good to see you. And now, Christina, haven't forgotten you, but let me go to Dr. Gruder and then we will come back. So, Dr. Gruder?
Oh, I'm first of all, and most importantly, I am loving how passionate all of you who are speaking up are. And it's so clear that so many of you on this webinar have so much to say, and not just so much to say, but so much to say that seems really important to me. And I love that that this passion is coming out on this call. And I'm wondering how to harness it, how to take it forward.
Mhm.
Well, it seems like, David, that instead of stopping at a part 3, that maybe we need to have another conversation. And because even a lot of the points that Jay brought out, and bouncing that off of with Ty and Carlos in the industry, there's the conversations should never stop, and they should never just be ignited because of a George Floyd that happens, or what's going on right now as far as politicizing whatever is happening, as far as even in our politics. We should never stop the conversations. And that's the goal of Partnering for a Better Tomorrow. I know that you and Ty Pruitt are going to be working on some ongoing things. You guys, we should never, ever stop the conversations. And even when we're not on this kind of platform, please have real conversations at your dinner tables. Speak on, you know what, like Jay, if you're at your dinner table and you're talking, you're saying, you guys, I might be talking about Marv or anything else, but so much of it is in relation to real life. Why don't we have someone that's gay or a Native American dealing with real life issues besides what is happening with Native Americans? They become lawyers, or they have to deal with illnesses, or they are buying a house, or, you know, instead of just dealing with things that may deal with the immediate of the race or whether they're gay or not, and dealing with gay or situations. So it's important to continue the conversations besides addressing, reacting to something that has happened. We all are human. We all have the same life, whether we live in Canada, Paris, Arkansas, Los Angeles. Like how someone might say, I'm going to move because there aren't any good men here. People are people. And no matter where you go, it's the same stuff, just a different address. So how do we continue the conversations? Ty, would you like to chime in?
Absolutely. You know, I always want to chime in. Firstly, Jay, the first time a comic book franchise starred a Black man and it actually made money and went on to television and film was Tales from the Crypt. You should look that up. It's an amazing comic book, and no one actually knew that the character was Black until the end of the comic book. He was an astronaut who went into space. He landed on a planet full of blue and orange people, and they showed him around the planet, and the entire comic book was about how people see each other. And at the end of the comic book, when he took his helmet off, he was Black. And everybody was shocked about it. So that is something that you actually would, it's an amazing comic book, and they did really well with it. As far as like the film industry is just screwed anyway, though. It's about, it's hard to explain with the film industry, because in the film industry, they pretty much literally want you to give up your soul to be successful. And that is something that you have to fight against. I had I remember when I first moved to LA. It was not long after I moved to LA, and I went to this LA party, and I had this young white woman who flipped out on me because she asked me. I'm a nationally published author. I wrote a fantasy sci-fi book that did well. It really did well for me. And when I started writing scripts, I refused to sell scripts to anybody. I refused to. I will not want a script. Just like the first thing I did when I wrote my book was made sure I kept ownership of the rights. No one owns my book except me. If you want to do something with my book, you have to talk to me. And when we were having that discussion, this young white woman flipped out because she said, "Who do you think you are? Everybody has to sell this. Everybody has to sell that. You have to make it in Hollywood." And my answer to her is, I don't want to make it in Hollywood. My goal is to own it. And in order for me to own it, I have to own my own. So I don't sell scripts. I don't write for other people. I make my own. When I sit down with people, I mean, if I was just after quick money, I would have did that working with Bill Duke. And that would have been quick money for me. I could have wrote anything for Bill and just handed it over to him. But that's not what I'm here for. That's not what I do. See, I'll spend my time living in my apartment, piling up script after script after script. And then when I sit down at a meeting with the execs from Netflix, our conversation will not be about, pay me to make this movie. Give me funding to make this movie. Nah, that's not our conversation. Our conversation is, I have this package, talk about distribution. Because that's what I want from you. You see what I'm saying? But the thing is, what makes these conversations great for me is I get to look at this screen and probably 2 or 3% of y'all look like me and everybody else doesn't. But everybody on this call gets it. And that's what you have to walk away with. Everybody gets it. People on this call, I figure me and Christina couldn't be the farthest from how different we are from each other. But we get it.
Yes.
I understand her, she understands me. We get it. Dr. Gruder, David, my friend, and a Jewish man, my guy, but he gets it. Me and David sit up on these types of calls and we have real conversations, and it's never about me being Black or him being Jewish. And we walk away feeling each other. And that's what's great about these conversations, and that's what it absolutely has to happen. And I understand the part that when you guys talk about what has to be written in law, and I'll take it back, and you guys have heard me say this before. For me, I could sit down and I could have a conversation with anybody. I could, you know, it doesn't have to be just me having a conversation with a different Black man to have conversations about slavery or to have this, that, and the other. It doesn't have to be, I don't choose Republicans or Democrats or independents. I don't choose that. For me, it's about humanity. For me, it's about your soul. For me, it's about who you are inside. Because if I can't connect with your spirit, and I'm not a religious man, so listen, here's my thing. Here's my thing. And this is probably, I don't want to offend anybody, you know, when you get to talking about religion, but the way I look at life, the way I go through life on a personal level is I don't live my life for the judgment of God. I don't do good in life to be judged when my life is over. I do what I do in life. I live the way that I live in hopes that I have no desire to ever walk through the pearly gates of heaven, because I don't care about that. What I care about is when my days are done, when my life is over, what I want to do is be able to look into my ancestors' eyes and ask, did I do enough? That's the only thing I want to know. That's the only way that's the only way I can rest, because of the absolute horrors that they endured, and this moment is what keeps me alive. It's what keeps me striving. It's what makes me have conversations with Christina and Hallie and Leslie and gives me the absolute joy of being friends with someone like David. The things that my ancestors went through and endured, that's who I pay homage to. That's who I live for. That is a glorious death for me, if I could sleep amongst those that came before me. So.
Well, I thank you for that, Ty. Before I come over to Christina, and also Ra, is it Ra? Am I pronouncing that right? Ra put in the chat, he said he received in his email, how do you say it, David?
I'm sorry, Raya Key.
Raya Key.
Raya is her first name.
Raya Key. Okay, Raya put in the chat, and you guys pay attention to this, and I also posted it on our Facebook Live, received an email where From the Heart Productions, and they've been giving funding since 1993. They will be doing a workshop in February on how to get your film funded. So our gentlemen that are in the industry, and she says, I'm also associated with Illuminate the Film Festival, and we're seeking conscious and healing films, now also virtual and year round. So thank you for that, Raya, for posting that. What city are you in, Raya Key? Where are you on from?
I'm in, excuse me, I'm in Sedona, Arizona.
Okay, thank you so much for being on. And Dr. Hallie she has left the building, but she's still with us in actually a taxi. So she's saying she's staying with us. Christina, what would you like to say, my dear? And then we'll come to you, Carlos. Wait, Christina, I'm asking you to unmute. There you come on.
Okay, there we go.
Here we go.
I just wanted to say I love all of you. I love you so much. You're like family to me now after these weeks of getting to really address some of these things. But the thing I wanted to say is that I agree completely with Ty that it is the humanity that we are building here together that is going to be kind of like a spark that gets out there and creates more creative bipartisan people that can actually double back and address the laws without the political process on either side hijacking the conversation. Now, it's not that when I mentioned moral superiority, there is a right. There is that right, because we are. I mean, this is the argument that you've been through, what you've been through, Sharita, and Michelle's been through what she's been through, and Ty's been through, and Carlos. The reality is the moral justice and the moral superiority is on the side of that argument, but the political process hijacks that to get to on both sides. It's hijacked and becomes a political thing that, and the humanity piece that we're doing right here is what can disarm that. And then it's going to have to be the creative bipartisans that get in there and get things done politically, I believe. More, because otherwise power corrupts completely and ends up coming in and kind of making it hard to get anything accomplished. That's that's what I was trying to say. It's not that the moral superiority isn't there. It's that we almost, we don't let it be hijacked, and we absolutely, the argument, it is there for the argument of that these are very real systemic problems that need to be addressed. And so all I'm saying is that we can't, like you say, the political process is broken, but the humanity piece is not broken. It's alive and well right here. And we can continue the conversation and create little flames that hopefully will be able to rectify it somehow later down the road as the political process can help change some things, hopefully.
Yes. Well, thank you for that. And next, Carlos.
First of all, thank you, Christina, for that, because it's the truth. We do come together as a people, and then that narrative is always changed. Example, Black Lives Matter, all lives matter, transgender lives matter, you know what I mean? And then it was never saying that none of those lives matter. That's like when it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. You never hear autism say, me too. You know what I mean? It's just Breast Cancer Awareness Month because
exactly.
It's not being disrespectful to anyone else. But yet when we have a narrative about equality, it has to be hijacked. And if we say Black, then it's changed to all, everyone, me too, dogs, cats, to avoid,
that was wrong.
Right, to avoid, the main point, So I definitely agree with you. It reminds me of this thing that God gave me. It says, what makes a rainbow beautiful? Is it not the diversity of colors? Well, if that's true, is mankind's kryptonite trying to make one color better than the next? And if that happens, is it still a rainbow? I think not. So why are we destroying something that God created beautiful with invisible lines of hate? We're all 6 degrees of separation from loving each other, but we choose not to because of these invisible lines. So for me, platforms like this, there's a post on Facebook, right? And it has these men on top of the Monopoly board, and they're laughing. And it says, if only they knew, all they had to do was come together and stand up.
Yeah.
That's how we create the change. The change comes from the same thing in history when change happened then. Black people ain't never freed themselves, period. It took every single color of the crayon box to come together to create situations to create the freedoms that we want. Biblically, the Bible says man united can accomplish anything. The problem is the systemic oppression continues to create different devices to use against us so that way we can't unite. So platforms like this allow us to come together, and we need to continue doing it on the grander scale, because once we unite every color in the crayon box, then we're able to draw and paint whatever beautiful picture we want.
Wait, Carlos, I'm having trouble hearing you. Is that me?
No, I'm Carlos. You somehow your volume somehow disappeared.
Okay.
You're muted now. You weren't muted before, but your volume just went down to almost nothing.
I'll go out and come back in.
Okay. Now, what did someone have something to say after Carlos? If not, I wanted to. Anyone else before I say something else? Well, while we're waiting, I just want to remind everyone about another forum that I have been hosting, and the part 3 is coming up again. And let me let him in. Let's see, admit. There we come. Okay, Carlos, you there?
Sorry about that. Is that better?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
Well, I don't know what part it went out on.
Well,
I was just basically saying that it takes every single color of the crayon to come together to paint a beautiful picture. And that's why I appreciate Ty saying that you don't have to look like me. You don't have to, you can have a different lifestyle, but as long as we all get it, and as long as we unite and we come together, we can become the unstoppable force. But the system knows this already. It knows that if we come together, then we'll be able to create the change that we want. So what it does is it comes up with different devices to keep us divided. Oh, blacks versus Spanish, Asians versus this, and it continues to pour into this. And I was talking to John Leslie, and he had this tape that he was listening to Steve Jobs and someone else, and they were talking about an aquarium where they put rats in it, and then they poured water in the rats, and they timed it to see how long it was going to take for the rats to drown. And then they put the next wave of rats, and the next wave of rats survived longer based off the work that, like Ty would say, the ancestors have laid for us. But sometimes we forget the work that ancestors have done for us, and we become ungrateful in that. Right. And but what the system understands is, as long as I just keep putting a little bit of more pressure on them, they'll never realize that they can come together to create the change that we want. So as long as we keep doing platforms like this, and as long as we keep coming together like this, we'll be able to make the change. We just have to see the game that they're playing, change the narrative, put them against each other, social class, color, money, black women, we're gonna dog them, we're gonna do cultural appropriate them, we're gonna make them feel like they're worthless. You know what I mean? As a black woman, we're gonna oppress them. We're never gonna get them on the couch to create the healing, because we know if these people ever wake up and heal, they'll shut down the whole system. These conglomerates are only conglomerates based off of us being consumers to make them that. Walmart wouldn't be Walmart if they didn't have no customers. Pfizer wouldn't be Pfizer if we didn't go there to buy the medicine. So we have to understand that our buying power and our unity, we give them strength to be the 1%. We are allowing them to be the difference. But if we ever united and didn't support that, and we supported what we created, which could be the America that we want to have the equality, then the system would change. But until we wake up and understand our own unity and our own self-worth and our own buying power, we'll never be that, because they keep us suppressed with drugs and the BS.
Well, outstanding. Well, you know what,
And
Carlos,
with that being said, it can't just happen on calls like this. It's got to happen. What you guys do when you get off these calls is what will change the dynamics of what we build. Yes. What you talk about, Christina, with your friends is what changes the dynamics of what we build and where we're at. Same thing with you, Jay, Enos, Leslie, and talk about what we're talking about and tell us how you feel. You have to be able to have these conversations with your family members, your distant friends, and because on this platform, you're safe. But we need to see what you can do when you're not safe. Yes. When you're out there in that cruel world that's telling you, well, all Black people look alike. What do you say? What do you say to them that you wouldn't say to me? You see what I'm saying? It's kind of I was looking at, for the life of me, I don't know why I was even indulging in something that Rudy Giuliani was doing, but he was having this, session in, I forget where it was. I think it was Georgia on voter, on the election being stolen. And he brought forth one of his witnesses. And the woman literally told the judges that voter IDs don't make sense to me, because to me, all Chinese people look alike. So why wouldn't you ID them? You see what I'm saying? She literally said that out loud. And that is what the climate and politics is becoming. So what you say, like, I'll shoot this at you, Christina, because as far as I know, you're like the only Republican that's on here. And what you say to your Republican groups is what changes the dynamic of what we could bring forth as far as building our own society, our own world, as far as making equality an actual thing instead of just something we talk about on this platform. But it has to go to distance. It has to go beyond these four walls, beyond these computers. I mean, the people who know me will tell you that what I say on this forum, I say to everybody I know. Everybody. Mm-hmm. Everybody. I don't mince my words with anybody. I don't sugarcoat anything. I've had my mother tell me, wow, did you really just say that to me? Yeah, I did. Because if you can't say it out there, then you don't even belong on this forum with us, because that's what this is for. That's what this is building. See,
yes.
The thing is that I don't look at people as a color, or, I don't look at people from, I don't look at people, I always say this to people, especially, I had this conversation with a guy who was this real, like, this guy was like, and I have no problem with religion, but this guy was like a straight out the box Bible thumper. Like, he was, brimstone and fire, like, and we were having this conversation, and I said two things to him that just really like set him off. And we were having this conversation, and he was trying to convince me of what religion I should go with. And he started asking me questions. And the first thing I told him was, he asked me about what I thought was the truth. And I said, in my opinion, there's one truth and everybody has it. And he asked me how I could say that. And here's why I say that. Because it is not my right or my authority to tell a Buddhist that their religion is wrong. What they believe is their truth. The same thing with a Muslim. If Allah is your truth, that is, in fact, your truth. It is not my right to take that away from you. Mm-hmm. So that pissed him off. So the other thing I said to him that really just set him off is, see, I have a friend who's a hardcore atheist, only believes in science. But on the other hand, I have a friend who's like hardcore Christian. She believes in everything in the Bible. I have friends who are hardcore Muslims, will eat a bean pie 3-4 times a day. And what I said to him was, if all of us were on a plane and that plane crashed, and I've got my gay friend, my atheist friend, my Muslim friend, my Baptist friend, and we were all standing at the gates, at those pearly gates. And when they opened up, they said, all right, Ty, you lived your life right, but I can't take them. I would refuse that entry and go with them. Because that is how I live my life.
Would say you wouldn't change it then, huh?
I would not change it then. I told you, I told my mother when I was very young, I will never bend the knee to anything or anybody. And I will not. I live my life the way I want to live it. I live it right. I don't do any harm to anybody. I love everything and everybody. I take walks with my dogs in the mornings, and I just look in the sky and I just think to myself, this world is absolutely beautiful. Yes, we have the greatest country in the world with seemingly the worst people, because we all put each other in a different box, because we are too shallow and too narrow-minded to see beauty for what it is.
Yes. Well,
and Ty, beauty is not in your skin color, it's beneath. It's about the person you are.
Indeed.
Well, we've
So,
got so much beauty on this call and so
oh,
many wonderful people.
yes. And
I
Christina had
we
wanted to
it's been
respond really quickly. She had a very brief response to
yeah,
Ty.
yes.
You're muted, Christina. Unmute yourself, Christina.
I just asked you to unmute, Christina.
Oh, I wanted to say to Ty, if I was on one thing, I just wanted to say you're perfect the way you are, but I wanted to say I wouldn't let that airplane scenario dissuade you from the God, because this is the thing. He cares more about those other people that are on the plane than you do. So so he cares more about them than you do, and you can just leave it at that and let him worry about the rest. But I was going to say, as far as this other discussion, I wanted to say, as a Republican woman, part of the problem is there's a misconception on who we are. So I just wanted to say that most everyone that I know in my circles are absolutely reforming the law enforcement, all of those things. So there's a big media puts out this big misconception: Republican women are the least racist people on the planet. So there's misconceptions there. And I wanted to say, thankfully, I have very few people in my family that are there's no one in my family that has a racist bone in their body. But I have some people in the Midwest, a few little people that regionally are in a pocket where they were raised a certain way, and they're on my Facebook. And I wanted to say that anyone that knows me knows that I stand up for vigilantly. I'm a Scorpio. See, there's my Christian Scorpio woman. I stand up vigilantly for everyone, for my beliefs and my beliefs in regard to racism. I stand up I cannot be a dual person. So I just wanted to say that. And that this misconception is part of the media piece that we need to discuss. The media on both sides that are keeping people apart is the fact that they mischaracterize and make big characterizations of people that just are not true, and of groups that are not true. Even if there's a few in each side that are extremists, there is absolutely a middle ground, that there's people that are Republicans because of racial justice and history, and there are people that are Democrats because of racial justice. So I just wanted to say that we are the creative bipartisans, in my view.
Well, as I told you before, give 1 second, Sharita, then I'll throw it back at you. As I told you before, Christina, never, ever, ever let anybody talk down to you for being a Republican, because the Republican Party is the party of Lincoln, who freed the slaves. So don't let anybody talk down to you about being a Republican. Be a proud Republican, stand for what you stand for. But I will tell you, what you see today is an absolute betrayal to your party. What you see today is not the Republican Party. Now, I will also give you this advice. Never say that you're the least racist person ever, because that kind of means you're a little racist. So don't say that.
I didn't say that.
That's kind of, wait. Let me explain that to you. That's kind of like you saying, I have black friends, or
did I say I was the least racist person?
No, you didn't.
I think I said that.
What you said was
Republican. My family doesn't have racist bones in their body. They just don't.
Yeah, that's not something you have to tell us. That's something you prove to us every time you show up on this platform. That's something that and that conversation could go for me and David. And we had this conversation because Black people are probably more racist towards Jews than white people are. And that is something that we have to work on, because as far as backgrounds go, something that me and David actually talked about is we have, as far as Black people and Jewish people, we have probably the closest backgrounds to any other minority on this planet, besides the Native Americans. Mm-hmm. And I see it I see it all the time. I see it a lot with I see it a lot with Bernie Sanders. That's why a lot of people didn't want to vote, didn't want to go with Bernie Sanders. It's absolutely I say this to say that you prove what you are, not by what you say, by what you do. So you don't have to tell us that Republican women aren't racist because we can see it in you.
Okay.
Yeah, Christina, and
Expensive. I just am like that sometimes.
You don't have to say it. Your actions already tell us who you are.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you never, that's all I'm saying. You don't have to defend yourself with us because we already know who you are. And anyone that's
I'll try to be less defensive.
Yeah.
Yes,
well,
yes. Anyone that's around you, who you are, your spirit, your beliefs is evident. And because you're consistent. And now for all of you, please, you can download the chat because there's a lot of good information in the chat. And I would try and remember also to include the chat when I do the recap. I want to say something else also. I'm going to share my screen just really quick because this call is not just for Black people. Right. You guys, this has been an unbelievable forum that this is part 3 coming up, and it's called The Infamous N-Word. You guys have to get on this call if you can. I don't care whether you're Black, brown, gay, Hispanic, whatever. There has been so much information brought out on the infamous N-word. For one, when we hear the N-word, we won't even say it. But it is unbelievable that the word nigga, nigra, that Africa even used to be called Negrisha. It was renamed Africa. But the N-word is actually a word almost like of high esteem. And if you and B Hall, who is our speaker during this session, and she brings on other well-studied individuals, it is unbelievable what has come out of these calls. And I invite all of you to be on the next one. I will be posting it and I will send it out to you. But since we're on about talking about race and talking about how people feel as far as just all of our beliefs, I just wanted to bring up that this forum I invite you to be on, and it is very informative. Okay, let me stop my share. And I want to thank all of you. Now I know our panelists, if you've got any last words, we're going over 2 hours. I'd like to hear what our panelists have to say, David and Ty, in closing.
So my closing has 2 brief parts to it. The first is for all of us who are not people of color. I really want to underscore what Ty and others have been saying on this call. It's not about saying things like, I don't have racism in my family. It's about embodying the absence of that ourselves. And the ironic part of it is that I have learned that when I move beyond embodying who I am and I start making comments about things like there isn't racism in my family or things like that, I actually end up undoing my credibility. It actually reduces my credibility to say that. So I want to offer that up to people who are not people of color. And along those similar lines, the second part is I'm going to drop something into the chat box, which is I have a holistic framework for how individuals can psychologically outgrow whatever systemic programming and implicit bias around racism was implanted in us. And it's particularly to help those who aren't people of color to wake up. but it's really for everyone. But I wrote it specifically for people who are not people of color. And it's the URL is replacingracism.com. Replacingracism.com. And there's a live link in the chat box to that. I am just totally delighted with all of your participation in this webinar and in all three of these webinars in this series. I'm just so delighted with the fact that so many of you have so much to say about all of this, all of these issues in ways that that help us elevate, help us rise up individually and together. And that just warms my heart. And thank you, Sharita, for facilitating and moderating and sponsoring these webinars, this triple webinar series. I'm complete.
Thank you. And Ty?
I mean, a great joke would be for me to say, David, you complete me, but I won't go there. So listen, I mean, I am coming from where I come from. I am so humbled that you guys would actually take time out of your day to listen to what I have to say. I am extremely humbled for someone like David to call me a friend. I love the fact that we could have these conversations, that we could be as real with each other as we are, and nobody walks away upset, and everybody walks away with a piece of everybody else to learn from. I will tell you that, and I don't know if you guys saw it, but my dogs are attacking me right now because they want to go walk, but I'll get to that in a minute. I just want to tell the people on here who are not Black, don't feel like you can't do anything to help in the progress of what life should be like for all of us. Because just the fact that you sit back and you think about it is progress in itself. Because you have the nerve and the balls to come on this forum with us and have these conversations. And I also want to say that you hear during these calls, you've heard a lot of horror stories. You've heard some stories about, you know, us and our lives, like the Black people on this call. It's not for you to feel sorry for us or for Black people. That is not what this is about. We don't want sympathy. That's not what this is about. I can tell you, me personally, I absolutely love being a Black man. If I die 1,000 times and my maker said, okay, I'm sending you back, what do you want to go as? Send me back as a brother. I'm coming back Black. I love my world. I love my history. As horrific as it is, it gives me this platform. It gives me the heart and soul to fight for those who can't fight for themselves. And that's including those who don't look like me. That is what I get from being Black. So no matter what grievances I have, no matter what horrors I've seen, it doesn't shake the man that I become and that I am. So please, please continue to join these forums, continue to fight outside of these walls, continue to counsel and educate your family members and your friends, and know that I consider you all as my family when you're not on this call. And that's it for me.
Thank you so much.
Back
Thank
at
you,
you.
Ty Pruitt and Dr. David Gruder. You two have been absolutely phenomenal panelists over these past 3 series. And I'm serious. I think that we should have another. I want to thank Christina and Hallie and Leslie and Inez and Jay, Michelle, Carlos, and others that have been on. All of your input has been just phenomenal. It has made all of us think about different things, no matter what it is that you've presented. And I'm sure that those that will listen to the recording later will gain from it. I want to thank everyone else, the emails that I've received for individuals that appreciate. Some people just kind of see us on Facebook and I get either a private message or something later. But either way, whoever hears these conversations or those that are meant to hear it. And again, please, if you can, get on the controversial N-word that we will have coming up next. Carlos Martin, we're going to be featuring you and talking about your movie. I'm sure that individuals on the call that have met you, that have heard you, will want to hear that. So again, you guys have a phenomenal rest of the weekend. Have a wonderful, joyful holiday season, no matter what your beliefs are, whether it's Hanukkah, no Christmas at all. Just live life to the fullest. Don't use live your best life just as a cliche. Life is so short, and things can change in the blink of an eye. So love life, love the people that you're around, pray to, whatever prayers that you do, but try to be the best man, woman, father, uncle, neighbor, colleague that you can be. This is Sharita Herring Oglesby with Partnering for a Better Tomorrow, and my organization is Philanthropy Alliance Foundation. Go to our website and sign up to subscribe to get all the information for the upcoming forums. And again, you guys, thank you for being on. Thank you to my esteemed panelists, and you guys have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the weekend.
Thank you so much.